Welcome back, everyone, to the Great Awakening podcast. I am your host, Jennifer Longmore, and I don't know, it's very rare I've been this excited and this passionate about sharing someone with you to support you on your ascension journey. So once you get a chance to meet Timothy Brainard, you'll know what I'm talking about. So Timothy is a full-time human being. I love that. I noticed that on your bio. You might remember when we were having an email exchange, and I noticed that right away. And you'd mentioned that nobody else had noticed that. But we all put these titles there, right? And of course, we're more than our titles and our label maker 3000s. Timothy is also the creator of the Body Keys, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. The Forgotten Sense, which I'm very curious about, Mineral Allies, Crystal Self, and much more. So he has dedicated a huge chunk of his life to the elegance and authenticity of sustainable ways of really being in our life fully. So there'll be more to share, but Timothy, welcome to
Hi, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're really lucky, everyone, because Timothy has become a master of his time and mastering his energy and so on. So he only has one conversation a day, and today he's having it with us. So we're in for a real treat. I don't even know where to start. Do you have anything you want to share before we dive in and I start giving you 20 questions?
Ooh, well, first of all, I can't wait for the 20 questions because that flow of dialogue and exchange is so necessary. And knowing what I know about you, the value of inquiry for your story and how that contributes to life and others like me and everyone listening, so excited about that. The only thing I would say to everyone listening and you right now is thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. Genuinely thrilled to be here and grateful for that very generous introduction.
Well, thank you. I will say, having told a lot of people about you, and I know a lot of people are excited to listen to this episode because I've been talking it up forever, is just how genuine you are when you say you're grateful to be somewhere. It's really heartfelt. I mean, I think we can all mean that to a certain degree, but with you, there's a level of presence, I think, that is pretty unparalleled. So thank you for who you be.
Wow.
Well, I guess, we could go in a lot of different ways. We could do the traditional tell us about how you got here and the long winding road. And I know that'll get woven in, but I think given the time that we have, I'll share with everyone that I had a session. Well, I've actually had a few sessions with Timothy, but after my first session, I found out about Timothy from our mutual friend, Christina Rice, who many of you know as well. And Christina geeks out on human design. And I happened to be mentioning that I felt my body shifting again, and I felt guided to do vegan ketosis, but I was reading it and I'm like, I could feel it almost, right? Like my body was like, no, what? And it wasn't just about the food, but I think many of us are trying to navigate the ascension journey that we're in and recognizing that the body is constantly trying to calibrate to our frequency upgrades, if we want to call it that. And yet, well, I can speak for myself that as much as I've paid attention to my body, I've really not paid attention to my body. I haven't been in the relationship with my body that I thought I was. And I knew there was work to do, right? But I didn't realize the vastness of the gifts available in the body, with the body being its own consciousness, having its own journey, then co-creating with the consciousness of me, my oversoul, or whatever you want to call it, and all of the things. And then we pack in there the post-2020 world. We pack in there, just all kinds of awarenesses that maybe we had been somewhat immune to before, or unaware of, or whatever we want to call it. And here we are, needing the body to work with us to be doing what we came here to be, or what we're coded for. So with that in mind, I had a session with Timothy, and it was, I don't even have the words for it, really. Maybe you have words for it, Timothy. I don't have words for it. But I realized, oh, this is literally the beginning of a very important journey. This isn't a 1 or 2 session thing. This is a commitment and dedication to be in relationship with the body in a way that allows Well, allows consciousness to spread in a way that we came here to do. So maybe you could share a little bit about what does it really mean to go into human design? We'll start with human design. What does it really mean to go into human design and look at the specific pieces around the body, like what the body wants to eat, what it can metabolize, what it can't metabolize, what temperatures it prefers, what senses we use, all of the things. What can you share with us about that?
A lot. That's a favorite topic for me. For those of you, well, for all of you, whether you're new to human design or not, it's worth knowing that human design as a system is only useful insofar as we bring the information available to us within that system into everyday life. That's the key. And that's a key that I've been connected to from the beginning. I recognized that there was a ton of information here, and I could almost feel the vacuum, the way that wanted to suck me up into the conceptual space. And there's a lot with human design. There's a lot of information, so a lot of detail that you can learn about. There's a whole cosmology, which is its own like world of, you can argue that it's theory or you can argue that it's reality, but it's a cosmology. So it's a worldview, and there's just a lot of talk and a lot of words and a lot of brilliant ideas there. But ultimately, what is the value of an idea if it is not in some meaningful way elevating the quality of our moment by moment experience, right? And so my relationship with all that information has always been emphasizing embodiment. How do we make this real? Right? And it was, I think, as a result of that emphasis within me as something very fundamental to who I am, it was that fundamental emphasis on practicality that opened the door to this corner of human design known as the primary health system. And this is a very specific application of the human design system to the question of how we eat. How do our bodies work energetically in relationship with life? How do we take in information and make use of it? On the subject of food, that question is restated as how do we take in the information that we refer to as nutrition and metabolize it? Mm-hmm. But of course, that beginning conversation about eating naturally and necessarily extends beyond food to describe how it is that we encounter and make sense of our own lives. So that's what I refer to as dietary regimen, which is the first opportunity that Jennifer and I had to interact. That was the point of this conversation. We were able to derive a complete analysis based on Jennifer's human design. It's known as her body graph. Her human design is known as a body graph. I was able to use her body graph to prepare an analysis, which helped us to understand her unique way for meeting life. Yes, that included her body's unique relationship to food, which is just really mind-blowing when you get a sense for that each one of us has a unique relationship to food. I mean, for those of you listening, just like breathe that in for a second and consider how many diets and systems and modalities and teachers out there are telling you the right thing to do, and not one of them can see you. They're selling to an audience, but the fact of the matter is each one of us as an individual is not a general audience. We are individuals, and there is something special happening within each one of us, and dietary regimen begins to open the door to that uniqueness. I'll pause there for a minute. You can get the excitement, hopefully, and hopefully the idea.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. Like, honestly, everyone, we're gonna probably need to do a whole series with Timothy. Maybe that's something we can do together, Timothy. I don't know, to help people with that. I think that would be fun. So to give everyone an insight, so I think the first thing for me with having this session with you was that it was validating. Many years ago, almost 2 decades ago, I woke up one day, and as I was waking up, and Timothy, I shared this with you, I had this visceral disdain for any animal products. Like, out of nowhere, I had this immense rejection of something that I'd been eating my whole life. I was pretty much eating a cow a day. Like, I loved steak, and I didn't actually like a lot of other animal proteins, weirdly, but I could eat steak like nobody's business, as an example. And I never really understood it. And as a vegan, it's not a moral choice for me, although I can, start to see some of this stuff out in the world. the point is that I've fielded so many questions. Like people feel, and you probably noticed this too, Timothy, and all of you probably noticed this too. Like I went out for dinner last night, for example, with my in-laws. They're here visiting, and we go to the restaurant and everyone's eating. And I get interrogated. Why are you not eating? Well, like you're in a steakhouse, there's nothing appealing to me here anyways, right? But I need to eat when I feel good about eating. But people get very uncomfortable when you're not eating the way that they want, you're not eating the way society thinks you should eat. And then if I happen to say, well, I'm vegan, then they want to point out all these other options that probably aren't really vegan, and assuming that every vegan wants a veggie burger. And like, I might as well bite into a cardboard box. That's how appealing a veggie burger is to me. Sorry, people that love veggie burgers. I'm just not that person. But anyways, that's an example of how I was guided. I guess what I'm trying to say is our human design, unbeknownst to us, is always trying to pull us towards how it's designed and what's going to help it be optimized. And I assumed at the time, and maybe this was partly true, I was channeling a lot of energy at the time. I was doing a lot of ascension-based classes. And I felt like, oh, well, my body must just need things that are light in it, must need things that are not dead, because then I was guided to become raw vegan, which is, all the food has an aura around it. But even with that, I could digest raw food really well, but I also became healthier and unhealthier at the same time, because what I found out from you is that I need to be having food that's above body temperature. And and a lot of raw food is not cooked. I mean, you can have some warm stuff, but it's a lot of nightshades. It's just a lot of cool energy in there and damp energy. And so that didn't really work well for me. So that's an example of something. And then the second piece, the second opportunity for me was when you were telling me, so the other validation was I drink a lot of hot teas, and people are always making fun of me that I'm cold. And again, not anyone's business. Like, I don't know why it affects you that my hands and feet are cold, but they are. Anyways, I was just naturally guided. So it's validation to me, and hopefully to you, that our guidance system is always trying to pull us back into equilibrium with it. And when we honor these nudges, even when they don't make sense or they don't fit what the programming is, that it doesn't mean it's wrong. It means we're each uniquely designed. And part of why I brought you on here with Timothy is that that's going to take a significant amount of study in human design, or you could just work with someone to help you get really clear on that right now. The second thing I would say is, and I probably didn't even express this fully to you at the time, Timothy, but when you started telling me how I was meant to eat, I could feel the energy. I could feel it like, oh shit, this is going to be a journey, right? So one of the things you told me is that I'm meant to be fully immersed in the experience of making my food and make it a whole experience, which makes sense for me as a generator and all the other things you would have uncovered. And so there was a part of me that's like, oh, that sounds so heavenly. Oh, that sounds so inviting. Oh, how beautiful is that? And then I started thinking, there's probably people on this, like, I always admire people that do that, right? I see people that put this whole big production into making food all day, and they love it, being in the kitchen and creating this whole experience. And then the other part of my brain went, where am I going to have time for this? And I'm all based on convenience. And how am I going to carve out time to turn this into a whole experience? And this, like, not that it's work, but it's work, if that makes sense, right? So that's an example. I don't know if you want to say any more about that. It sounds like you might have something to add to that.
It's pure gold. And part of the reason why it's pure gold is because it's direct experience. So for those of you listening, everything Jennifer has just shared with you it's a privilege that we get to receive that directly from your personal experience, because that's empirical data. That's something we can really run with. So a few things that I picked up on. First, I would like to make this very clear for anyone listening that it's not just that it's our human design calling us to how we are supposed to operate, what the ideal is necessarily. It's that the force of your nature is unavoidable. And human design is just one system of many legitimate and capable systems that help us to remember ourselves. That's the point. So if we choose to use human design, dietary regimen, the body keys, anything at all, a book you're reading, your totem animals, it doesn't matter. Whatever we choose to utilize as a resource for remembering our own nature, that thing then becomes prominent in our experience, because there's nothing more important. You can call it, the ascension process will not occur until you first establish a root system in your own nature and you're willing and courageous enough to express that nature. So I feel that this is really worth stating. Human design has been a wonderful contributor to my experience, and it's already behind me, because it's begun the work that is the real work. Studying human design is not the work. Remembering ourselves is. So I feel like that's really important. And then the other thing that's just excited me, Jennifer, to hear you describe, was the way that there was this sense of like opening toward a way of being around food in particular that was spacious and poetic and ritualized and beautiful. And the pace of it was slow. And you described how you had previously witnessed others interacting with their lives in this way and felt like, oh, that's so beautiful. But how can I tap that? Well, the two things that strike me about this are, first, amazingly, just this morning, I read a quote by Neville Goddard. And many of you listening are probably familiar with him. And it said simply this, it's like, I knew when I read it that it would come in handy, and here we are. He said this: your desire is the solution to your problem. There is a deep secret in this. Your desire is the solution to your problem. And this is a pristine example of that. Jennifer was capable of witnessing something that to her appeared beautiful. And there was a gap between where she was and what she was seeing, but that opening toward that, ooh, that's beautiful, that desire, that's rooted in something beneath the mind, I promise you. And you can feel it when that happens. And now here, all this time later, Jennifer discovers that, oh my, this is in fact connected to the fundament of who she is. That desire was in fact and will remain a solution to a primary problem in her experience, which is going to be a question of pace, at least to some extent, because that's the barrier. We have been trained to hurry, to hustle, to get it. And something about life, and you see it all around you in nature, is much slower and more circuitous. It's not linear, it's complex and it's rich and there's depth and things take time. But when things grow within that context of time, boy, do they ever grow, and boy, do they ever produce. And now there's a version of self that arises, which differs dramatically in quality from that which we attempted to construct by means of effort. So I'll pause there again, but I hope we're able to kind of get a sense for that. Jennifer, you just like opened multiple doors for us, and I'm grateful.
That's an amazing quote. And I can see that, yeah, because I can speak for myself, but I think I'm probably speaking for many of us that I have a desire to be in a harmonious relationship with my body.
Yeah, there you go.
And I feel like as lighthouses, as service providers, as people that do a lot of out of our body sort of things, like we might think we're embodied, but I do think I remember how floaty I used to be when I was teaching energy all the time. My voice was way higher. And as someone that's an earth sign, like I'm pretty grounded, but I also was very ungrounded. Right. And so I think we can be under the impression that we're way more embodied than we actually are. I know even from just teaching all about the energy of money, that the degree to which we bring that wisdom into our body is going to determine how sustainable our ability to receive more and hold more and stuff is, right? And I know that's true of a lot of things. So the other thing that that struck me about all of this, well, we did a few sessions because we're going to talk about the body keys as well. But when you're talking about the desire, anyways, getting back to that, yeah, I have a desire, right? So you never know how this stuff's going to present itself, but the desire will be answered, right?
Yes.
And so I have a desire to, well, so the other piece of this, when we did the body keys and you were sharing some other things with me about how my body wants to move, and a lot of it's very validating, everyone. Like I I even manifested the most ideal gym situation, and it still ended up being a vibrational mismatch. And it wasn't that anyone did anything wrong. It's that my energy field is so discerning and so particular about the energies that it wants to be exposed to, that the consciousness in a gym environment, even if everyone's lovely and friendly and it's the most positive vibe ever, the consciousness isn't necessarily a vibrational match, on top of the fact that my body doesn't want to move that way. So I would be making myself wrong for being gung-ho. And I'm saying this, and I would invite all of you to perk up your Scooby-Doo ears, because I know many of you will be able to relate to this. Whatever the thing is, right? I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to drink more water. Well, if your body doesn't want cold water, maybe you're not sticking to your water because you're not enjoying what you're drinking. Or I'm wrong. I suck. Why am I always procrastinating? Why am I not motivated? How come I can't go to the gym? How come I say I'm going to go to the gym and it only lasts for 3 weeks and I can't stick to it? And we go into this shame spiral. We go into the blame, shame, judgment game, when in fact, the body has been speaking to us all along about where it wants to be and where it doesn't want to be, and how it wants to move and how it doesn't want to move. And yet the ego plus the societal programming about, if you want to get fit, this is what you have to do for your body, or this is what you have to eat, or this is what you have to consume, or whatever. And in fact, many of us are working against how we're actually sort of wired. So I don't know what you would like to add to that.
Nothing needs to be added to that on the one hand, because I know that all of your listeners are, because we all exist in this world, every one of us has experienced what you've described. Every one of us has made ourselves wrong under the best of intentions, which is, that's the catch-22. That's where we start to feel really scrambled up. I'm so impressed by what you've shared, because it actually, it connects to the forgotten sense. And so for the briefest moment, I will say this, that in the forgotten sense, we're learning how to unify our two primary forms of awareness, which are, we might refer to them as the mind and the body. And in that context of the forgotten sense, I have what I call 3 pillars. And each of these pillars is a practice that we can engage in. The first of these pillars is called body listening. This is the ability to turn our conscious awareness, our powerful conscious awareness, inward, to begin to recognize all the different forms of communication that the body is always transmitting. And that's the part that you probably saw me just like beaming over here when you said it, Jennifer. It's like, that's it. All along the way, we are being shown, but we don't know it. And whose fault is that? There's an innocence to that. We haven't known it. We haven't been told. And so we're working so hard and applying ourselves so sincerely, and so much effort is being offered over to things, and so much of our vital energy is being spent. And in spite of it all, we find ourselves squeezed into a corner that is simply mismatched to the aim that we had in mind at the beginning. And so what's going on there? Well, in more cases than not, what's going on is that we are oblivious to the very clear signals that life, God, source, the universe, call it what you will, is offering us through the single most valuable mechanism of communication that we have access to as conscious human beings, which is the body itself. This is so big. This is why it's the only thing I'll ever talk about. It's a part of why we're all here. So thank you for opening that door now too, Jennifer. Well done.
Thank you. I'm also thinking about, and these can sound sort of, I hope you're all receiving the depth of this, right? Because it's way more profound than we even have human words, I think, right, to describe it. But one of the things you shared with me from subsequent sessions we did was around the fact that my nose is my, I'll say, sensory aid, where it's my tool of perception. So we might all walk into a room and nobody smells anything, but if the energy's off in that room, it'll smell funny to me, even though nobody else will be able to smell it, if of course they don't have that perception center as well. And I end up getting so I'm not a person, weirdly, that gets super sensitive around perfumes and stuff, although I will say some of them, a little like offensive.
Ever pitch anyone?
Yeah, exactly. There are times where you can walk through some clouds of perfumes going, But I started to think about all of the times that, again, I've been made to feel like a diva, or I'm high maintenance or something like that because someone's been cooking food. Like my husband is a meat eater. There are many times I can come home and he'll be barbecuing steak, or there's a roast chicken or something, and it actually smells really good, even though I don't eat it. And there's other times where he can microwave like a frozen chicken dinner or something, and it's just like, I'm like, honey, can we please light some candles? And oof, this is, and we've got to open some windows. Like this is a little bit too much. But I can smell things quite profoundly, and it got me wondering, like the times that I've wanted to go places, and then all of a sudden at the last minute, I just felt an energy and went, I don't know, was that my nose? Weirdly, the future self, my future self has already arrived there, and my nose went, no, we're not doing
Absolutely.
this.
That absolutely could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason that I refer to these as superpower sensors. You said sensory aid. I'm like, no, it's bigger. It is,
Okay.
it really is a superpower sensor. And again, this, like what you've described, is something that revealed itself to me initially as a concept, which proved itself out over the course of years as genuine. You and I share this with the nose, and it's true. I used to go to a coffee shop every single day. It was within walking distance where I lived in Stamford, Connecticut at the time, and I loved that place. And they roasted their own beans there. And so I would walk into this coffee shop every day. There was one chair, one orange, comfortable chair that I referred to as my office. And that's where I would sit, and I would do my writing, and I would do my reading, and I would do my work. And most days I'd walk in, I'd open the door, take that one step into this coffee shop, and it felt and smelled like home. It smelled like roasting beans. I love coffee. When I lived in Phoenix, they called me the coffee king of Phoenix. I mean, I love it. So most days this was the case. And some days, and this is just, it makes no logical sense, but some days I'd open that door and it would smell like sewage. And so was there actually some strange scent in the place on those random days? I don't believe so. I believe that what's happening there is that we have these unavoidable sensory mechanisms which literally guide us from one moment to the next. And on those days, there was somewhere else for me to be. Maybe there was someone for me to meet at a different place that I don't get to know. We're not the ones in control of this. We are flutes that life sings through, that God sings through. And if we can surrender ourselves totally enough and actually listen in to these guidance systems, which are built into our form, we can align with that greater intelligence that does see the future, like you said, and is capable of bilocation. Like these are laws that we're just beginning to discover scientifically, but they've been inherent to consciousness as a whole since long before we ever tried to prove them. So we're dealing on a principle level here, and somehow that principle is in fact moving through the human mechanism on a sensory level. That's why the superpower sensors are superpowers. And it's why the forgotten sense, a literal sixth sense, which operates in the exact same way as all the 5 traditional senses, it's why it's such a big deal. And it's why it's the hub or home base of all my work. So yes, I love what you shared. Yes, we share it. So that's fine. And everyone listening has this. It may or may not be the sense of smell. The nose knows for those of us with a sense of smell, but it's also true that there are a total of 6 sensory systems, and it's well worth discovering what yours is. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I know someone who just came to you recently, and their ears are their superpower. So they vacuuming is very soothing to them. Now, someone else might look at them vacuuming and say, are you on the spectrum, or do you have OCD? Like, what's wrong with you? And I say that in quotations, right? Why are you vacuuming so much? But if that is a contribution, that's actually soothing to the superpower to be utilized in that way, and to have a, consistent sound. Or maybe there's someone that falls asleep well to white noise, or like, who knows, right? But there's things that will do. What I found interesting about the nose is that, because, and this is another thing you'll uncover when you have your session with Timothy, is that I'm a mountain type, right? So I'm needing spaciousness, but I also don't need a lot of oxygen. And so for many years, I've tried to do yoga, and I often get quite an attitude from yoga instructors when the breathing part comes, because I would have, like, I'm talking an unusual, like, extreme, visceral, instant irritation reaction to someone wanting me to do nostril breathing. I would get indignant, like not to them directly, but in my head, I'd be like, oh, this stupid breathing. Like I would get so mad. And it made no sense. So then, of course, I'm making myself wrong for why are you getting mad? Like, this is nothing. What you breathe every day. Why do you care if this? It seemed hokey to me. It just was so unappealing for me to engage in. And for some people that need to breathe deeply, they're going to love that stuff. That's probably why they teach it, right? They need that. I get a reaction. So we have someone that's an osteopath that comes to our house, and he also is a yoga instructor. So he brought up the other day, or like 2 weeks ago, hey, when I come over, do you guys also want to do yoga? And I said, well, I'm happy to do yoga, but I'm not going to be doing the nostril breathing. And he said, this is through text. Like when has anyone ever said that to you, right? So I said, I can explain it when you get here, but I'm happy to do yoga, but I really don't want to be doing, any kind of deep breathing or nostril breathing. So of course I told him, and then he came back again this past Thursday, and then he wanted to do some deep breathing. And so I just excused myself at that time and went to the bathroom, right? But I'm now, it sounds like a simple thing, but I'm in a very different relationship with that. I don't feel like I need to apologize. I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. I understand why my body does not want to be doing the deep breathing. Why, in fact, many activities that would be oxygenating my blood are unappealing to me, even though my brain tells me I should like them, right? I should like to go for a run, or I should like to do, constant cardio or things like that. No, I don't want to do that. I don't like to do that. It's not fun for me. And even just travel wise, I can see when I've gone to places that are in a high elevation that I feel different. I feel way more expansive. I feel way more healthy and way more invigorated than I do in spaces that are different than that.
So cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and I get the benefit as the provider of this analysis to witness this proving itself out time and time again. Jennifer's experience here is unique to her, but it's not uncommon for me, because these are the stories I hear all the time, and they're so exciting. For those of you listening, the mountain that she's referring to, the mountains type, is a very specific sort of environment. It's an environmental frequency which supports good health and well-being. So in a case like Jennifer's, as a mountains type, basically this means that one of the things that it means is that that oxygen can in fact have a corrosive effect on the blood in particular. So that's what she's referring to. And what's most exciting to me about this is that, though confirming of things that we've always known and maybe haven't seen or allowed, though permissive, and that alone has an enormous value, ultimately the sum of these things is that recognizing them and honoring them equals empowerment. Because now you can get out of your own way. Now in these areas, you can relax into what's natural. You can relax into being who you are without justification. There's no one to justify that to. You just get to be. And I promise you, this is something we learn in the gifts of the body keys. We begin to discover how enormous that actually is, how magnificent it truly is that you are you. And when you get out of the way, boy, this begins to blossom. Now we get to see what's truly possible for each one of us. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm thinking like it's hard. The reason I'm using myself as an example is because I feel like it maybe illustrates a little bit of the profoundness of the work that you're doing, right? So part of it is the validation. I think that we can all use the validation of why have we been leaning towards certain things, or why do certain things not resonate with us, and we are kind of in that why of needing to gather empirical evidence to to validate instead of just honoring it, right? And then the second piece is clarity. Okay, great. So now I'm clear on what's going to serve me, what's not. And then from that clarity, I can start to make a plan for my daily rituals, and I can start to just make even what seems the seemingly like the most seemingly small decisions for my body or my environment or whatever. And then of course, the larger things as well. So, but the thing that I noticed, and I mentioned this already about the food preparation, like that, actually, it sounds like a simple thing. And for those of you that maybe already do that, like awesome. And I am in awe of you for being able to do that. For me, that feels like a big undertaking. It's a totally doable undertaking. But inherent in that, there's a lot of unraveling of my relationship with time.
Mm-hmm.
And then entering into a different relationship with my body and a different relationship with food, such that the three of those come together as a trinity, essentially, right? To be supportive of my beingness. And it really may sound very simple to other people. To me, it actually seems like this is going to require some ongoing support and needing to unravel a lot of programming.
Yeah, that is entirely common and extremely appropriate. It is about reprogramming. And we talked about this when we met, but for those listening, it's useful to reimagine the whole idea of eating. We think of eating as a function, right? And it's about, you had mentioned convenience before. So how quickly can we get through this necessary act? This is how most of us encounter eating. And if we're really thoughtful, then we'll consider what it is that we're eating and how it contributes to the health of our body and things like this. But ultimately, it's just something we have to do. And so we think about eating as poking a piece of food with a fork and then putting that bite of food in our mouth. We are now eating. And what we discovered together in our analysis, and what the dietary regimen really kind of opens us to, is an awareness of eating as a movement. Mm-hmm. Eating is a movement that does in fact unfold over time, and it's a movement that contains, there are many dancers or players that are unfolding here. And so the act of eating begins with a hunger impulse and then moves into food selection and then moves into food preparation. And for many of us, then moves into food presentation, all before finally arriving at consumption. And all along the way, who are the players? You're dealing with the conscious mind, the physical body, the food itself, and the space that holds it. So there's quite a lot happening here. It is rich, it is complex, as is any song, as is any good piece of poetry, as is life. So we're tricking ourselves if we think we can just hurry through anything. And the benefit of dietary regimen, ultimately, I think this is really what you're pointing at, Jennifer, is that the benefit of this is that it opens us up not to a whole new way of eating, but a whole new way of being. Mm-hmm. That's its great value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It occurs to me too, as you're talking, because I'm reminded of another awareness I had when we started talking, which is that a lot of the work that you're doing is helping people realign or align with their superpowers. I don't know the right way to put it, but my point is it's all about how we're metabolizing life.
That's right.
And allowing that to be supportive of our beingness, of our body, etc. So then we take into account 2020. I mean, many people already kind of knew what was going to happen in 2020. But regardless of where we're at in the awakening journey, if you're listening to this show, it's because you're awake to what's going on in the world. And that is a whole ball of wax that needed to be metabolized. So we're already trying to metabolize data like pre-2020 life, right? And relationship with food and stuff. And then we have these big shitstorms coming on the world stage that we've got to metabolize, and other people's energetic responses to that, and like the compounding layers of all of that. Because I feel like a lot of people, I know we're all under surge capacity as a result. So our capacity to process is different. And then we're metabolizing stuff that we don't have a lot of reference points for. Mm-hmm. So we don't even know how to metabolize it.
It's true.
And we're trying to move all of this energy through a body that's already trying to learn how to metabolize life, and our beingness, which is already trying to metabolize life. So it's quite layered, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and I feel like this is really, for those of us that are moving into that next layer of being a lighthouse, whatever that looks like, I don't know how we could avoid not getting the lighthouse optimized in order to do that.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Can't be avoided. We are ineffective, void of a foundation. I mean, this is biblical stuff, right? You build your house on the sand or you build your house on a rock. And the effect of that decision is going to, it'll be significant. So how do we ground ourselves in some meaningful fashion? That's the question. You know, it's funny, when I first began offering human design readings, I never called them that, actually. I always referred to them as mirror sessions, because I never wanted to be the human design guy. So, well, you know, go figure. But I found myself laughing at a certain point when, after meeting a generator, I'd be like, oh, well, as a generator, your great lesson is to slow way down. And then I'd meet a projector. Well, as a projector, your great lesson is to slow way down. Eventually, I picked up on the fact that as human beings living in this modern civilization, our responsibility first and foremost is to come down and slow down. And so that's really what my work serves, regardless of which avenue you choose to take first or eventually. The fact is, each one of us has to learn to slow down and come down so that we can open. That's the point. If we can slow down and come down, we gain access to many, many layers of subtlety and nuance and necessary information, especially necessary for those of us who seek then to radiate in any meaningful way on behalf of others. So that's why slowing down is so important. And you said something which really struck me. Let me see if I can return to it. It really had to do with adapting. I wish I could remember exactly what you said, but I recalled, I can remember what came up in me in response, which is that there was, well, for most of my adult life, I've trained in the martial arts. And one of the things I learned early on is that the majority of mainstream martial art forms are training a system and response. So if someone throws a right punch, then I'm going to counter with a particular movement, you know. And I know what brought this up. It was your point about basically the world that has emerged on the other side of 2020 being new to us. So we're really in the throes of something unprecedented here, right? So the way this connects to my training is that early on, I was training this paint by numbers response to assault. But the fact of the matter is, if you're walking down the street and someone jumps out from behind a building and pushes you, you know, what do you do then? Because it's neither a right punch or a left kick or a, you know, like there's no way to calculate these odds in reality. It's one thing to do this in training, but once you actually meet life, things get messy real fast. So what we need is not a paint by numbers approach, which unfortunately is what most of these magic pill systems are offering. Just learn this, just take this course, just do this thing, complete this diet, achieve this weight or this vision of success, and you will have the thing. The fact of the matter is, you meet life, you're chugging right along, and then bam, you know, someone jumps out from behind a building and pushes you, right? Like we get surprised, curveballs come. So what we need to be able to develop, and this is the great lesson, it's the great lesson of every advanced form of martial arts, it's the lesson of every master in any system ever, is not a paint by numbers approach to all the many things which may or may not happen in life, but rather the capacity, the inner capacity to adapt. That's what we need to be able to cultivate. And you cannot adapt if you're tense, if you're worried, if you're trying to calculate the odds. You can only adapt when you are relaxed enough and sensitive enough to the input of the world around you, so that when that guy jumps out from behind the wall and pushes you, your body naturally adapts or dances with that movement in such a way that you're not even there to push any longer. And that's the martial arts ghost. You know, they're nowhere to be found. It's not a metaphor. It's a literal thing that we get to embody, and it's a literal thing that we get to live out as a way of being. How can we learn to adapt? In every case, the answer begins with slowing down. It begins with relaxing, and it begins with opening, so that we can become sensitive to the richness of life coursing through and around us at all times. I'm glad we're recording this, because I could never say that again.
Yeah, we'll have it transcribed. I'm laughing. I'm thinking about all the times I was ornery with my sensei when I was working on my black belt. because they would teach me all these knife blocks, and I'm like, I will learn this, but just so you know, this is completely unrealistic. And I'm not going to use this in real life. This is not a comfortable way to block a knife. And I would like, or I'm not going to, you know, but actually I will say, just as an aside, because I shared with you privately that I had done Krav Maga as well. And that is one that teaches you what do you do if someone comes up from behind when you're at the bank machine, or I had them throw me into a white van and do all those like real life, hardcore examples, which I know probably sounds weird to people because I'm very chill and zen, but it was a good experience. Point is that they would say, you know, as women, we will stand there. So they're teaching you to kick someone in the groin. My very first Krav Maga class, he said, you're not kicking me in the groin, you're kicking me in the throat, and my groin just happens to be in the way. This was within the first 2 minutes of the class. I went, oh, this is going to be an intense journey. Okay. And of course, as a woman, I'm like, but I don't want to hurt you. And he said the biggest issue with women is we'll kick someone in the groin, not realizing that that person might be hyped up on meth or crack or whatever. And you might need to kick them 6 or 7 times. Do you actually have the agility and the longevity to do that? Is that your smartest move, right? Because the whole point isn't to fight them, it's to run away, but we'll kick them and then we'll apologize. Sorry, I kicked you. And we'll stand there and wait to see what they do, right? So there's a lot of unprogramming and awareness of our programs and awareness of various things. And the same is true, I would say, for what I uncovered is, you know, right away, I said to you, oh my goodness, the body's the final frontier for me. I can see this. This is my last area of mastery. And I can see how it needed to be the last. I wouldn't have been in the place to really appreciate the depth of the work had I tried to do it sooner. In fact, I probably did try to do it sooner. And I, for whatever reasons, wasn't able to get here where I finally had the space to look at this and look at the things it brings up, right? How we metabolize life, how we move through life, how much we apologize for our existence, how much or how little space we're willing to take up. Of course, all of our parental programming around taking up space, let alone our relationship with food, our relationship with sitting down for a meal, and whether that was even pleasurable. In my house, it wasn't. There was a lot of yelling. And there's a lot of stuff that it's going to bring up. And of course, it's not just food based, right? It's the whole dynamic of the body and what that means. That I don't know how we'll be able to avoid addressing this if we're really wanting to optimize the vessel to be able to hold more light and do the work that we came here to do, especially during this time.
Yeah, but the tools are there and the support is there. And this conversation that we now get to share with all of you and anyone who listens after, this is a part of that. So I love what you're saying. And I'm celebrating the fact that we're not left alone to guess at this. That's huge. There are support systems in place. And of course, every aspect of my work is honed in on that. But I also recognize that the more and more that you live this out in your life and you discover these things for yourself, it necessarily integrates itself into everything you offer. And so this is where we begin to see the growth cycle that's inherent in nature itself. It's exponential growth. That's not linear. It's not you plus me. It's now already expanding. So take heart, anyone who's listening. It is a lot to face. And it is going to be necessary. There's no getting around that, just like Jennifer said. And it does not need to be like pulling your teeth out. In fact, because we're remembering the greatest and most beautiful truth of who we are, it's quite the opposite, in fact.
Yeah, I love that you said that. It's weirdly, there is some uncomfort or discomfort, I should say. And I'm only sharing that because I'd like to be real with all of you, that I'm not, you know, like, it's not confronting. It's not that it's confronting. It's that I'm learning how to leave the illusion of the comfort zone that I thought was comfortable, that actually never really was. I just learned to adjust to it, I think, right? So in that awareness, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. It's not bad. It's not a bad discomfort. It's just the awareness of, oh, we're doing things a little bit different now. And I'm aware that this is going to be a journey, so I'm not rushing it. And it's also actually very cathartic and very empowering and very inspiring and very uplifting to have the validation that I already mentioned, but even just to be in the field of possibilities, like, oh, wow, if I'm really going to lean into this work, what else is possible for me? What else is possible for my body? And then what else is possible for everyone that I touch as a result of this? That's really what I'm focusing on. Like, okay, if my body is a portal of possibility versus a portal of problems, then how do I get to relate to the world, right? And how what's the ripple effect of that?
Yeah, very well stated, and that is important to highlight. There is a way of being that feels natural to us, and then there is a way of being that is natural to us, and those two are often at odds with one another at first. And so what feels natural with a little n, a lowercase n, differs in many cases dramatically, and in most cases 180 degrees, like by 180 degrees from what's actually natural, capital N, for us. So discovering what's natural for us, discovering who we are, it's the most profound adventure we could ever go on. And it's a part of what we're here for. But it's only the beginning. And so as we unravel what it feels natural but isn't, there's discomfort. The ego is attached to that. Our sense of security is attached to that. Many relationships are attached to that. So the world, like dead skin, begins to kind of shed. And that's terrifying for so many reasons. And I think that's what you're pointing at, Jennifer. That process is a process of maturation, and it's an absolute necessity, But it's not the end of the story. And even once you do, in fact, begin to grow those roots into your nature, that's not the end of the story either, because then you get to produce. Then you get to become something unlike anything that's ever existed and contribute in a way that, at least qualitatively, differs entirely from anything you've done before. So there are very distinct phases to this. And essentially my work has identified the beginning point of that sequence so that every single human being, regardless of history, gender, race, age, can identify the one thing that affects everything. So that's where we're focused. And the Forgotten Sense actually demonstrates all of this with diagrams and models and proves it to your mind. But ultimately, for the time being, I think it's useful for each of you to hear that what we're doing here is, in fact, foundational, and that's by design.
Timothy, we could chat forever, but I know that people are probably full. There's that point where we get full, but also there's just so much to share. It would be a disservice to your body of wisdom that you're creating to try and wrap it all up in this time. So this is kind of the introductory explanation, with me using from some examples from my sessions to try and highlight work that's actually quite challenging to put into words to a certain degree. I mean, I know you have, but I think if all of you feel into the energy, you get what I'm saying. So I naturally highly encourage you to go and have some sessions with Timothy. And of course, you'll know if you're being guided to do that. So I guess the best way would be to go to your website, timothybrainard.com. We'll put all of these notes in the show notes for all of you listening, so you don't have to worry about that and trying to track it. But is there any other ways that are the best ways to connect?
Definitely, I encourage anyone listening to explore the website. It's meant to be explored. It's content rich. There's all sorts of good stuff there. You're going to learn on my website. If you wish to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, feel free to connect. For those of you who are serious about taking that next step, I encourage you to explore the Trifecta Package, which is now customizable. So the Trifecta allows you to select 3 different services, like dietary regimen, like a mirror session, like the body keys, like the Forgotten Sense, and literally construct your own experience at a discount. So that's where I would begin. I'd recommend beginning there. And Jennifer, just in closing, I have to thank you for being so generous with those stories. That means an awful lot to me, and hopefully to everyone listening too.
Well, thank you. And I will say, as an aside, which may be opening a can of worms, but when you go to Timothy's website, you're going to notice that that Timothy does business differently, and that's good, right? There's a certain blueprint, I guess you could say, for the online world. And while he has an online site, right, where you can buy from him and so on, your experience with his business is going to be different than what you're used to in the online world. And dare I say, this is my seed that I'm planting, that you're creating the new codes of business just based on what you're modeling, what you've created.
That's
And
true.
I guess maybe we can have a different conversation about that another time.
I would
But
love
even,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
even the fact that in your title at the end, right, in your email signatures, it says human being. And that struck me because we're so often saying, I'm a teacher, I'm a master channel, I'm, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that in the sense that those titles can kind of help people understand how we can support them. But I do think you're way more, I think you probably were already in the new model of doing business well before it's starting to emerge. And I do feel that that's emerging now with being the model for how do we do it now? Like we did it this way up until now, but how do we do it now in a way that feels aligned for everyone and honors our designs and our, superpowers and all of those things. So I will leave that there for now. But Timothy, thank you for being here, and let us all know how this served you. Please be sure to share it with as many people as you know, because I know a lot of people need to hear this message. We will see you again next time. Thank you for being
Yes.
here. Bye for
Thank you,
now.
everyone. Bye.